The future does not look great for US AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic. This may be their only option to survive. Let's get right into it. Major US companies have been leaving OpenAI and Anthropic AI models for cheaper open source models. In particular, the lower costs and the ability to control the weights of these models has been a leading factor causing this. And here are some examples. You can see Coinbase left US AI models for open source models and cut its costs by 50%. Using the popular GLM model as well as the Kimi. Also, you see Cursor left Claude and ChatGPT. Airbnb is scaling on Alibaba's model, as well as Simon, Shopify, and Microsoft have all either left the US AI models or are experimenting on cheaper open source models, such as DeepSeek. And these are not small companies. Microsoft recently made over $280 billion in annual revenue and has almost a $3 trillion market cap. Coinbase made $7.2 billion in annual revenue and has around a $40 billion market cap. So if these companies are complaining about the high costs of US AI models and are moving away to cheaper alternative open source models, how can we expect mid-sized companies or startups around the world to afford Claude or ChatGPT if Microsoft can't? And closed source models like OpenAI's ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude have very big differences with open source models. The closed source model requires you to send prompts or send calls to their API every single time. This has huge risks because intellectual property and other sensitive company data can be sent to those companies where they have it on their servers. This is very similar to what happened with Amazon. A lot of companies wanted to use Amazon's distribution and selling platform to push out their product and get more sales. However, it came with a big risk. When you sell your product on Amazon, they know the customers you are selling it to. They know the price points, your margins, your revenue, and even your best selling products. You essentially give them a lot of sensitive product information that you would not release publicly. In turn, they can take that data, replicate your product, and sell it to those same customers since they already have the information and know how much money they can make from it. This same risk applies to ChatGPT and Claude. When you send in those prompts or that data and you get that output, they technically can retain all of this information. If engineers are vibe coding or a company is putting product marketing strategy, they can eventually copy that and make their own products. This is different from open source models because you can actually run those models locally on your own infrastructure. This means you control your data, the weights of a model, and your information never goes to a third party. Whether you're a tech business or a hospital, the security of your data is very important. And it's not just that. As I recounted in a previous video about OpenAI, there is an acute disadvantage in pricing for US AI models compared to foreign AI models, particularly those like DeepSeek. Even if you decide to send prompts to DeepSeek and use them directly, US AI companies are still charging around 30 times more, but have similar performance. So how does this make sense for most businesses? And this goes even further. For businesses and especially for agentic workflows, we now know that it's much better to train local model to do specific job duties. And actually, Microsoft's current CEO, Satya Nadella, agrees with this.
What it proves is that by assigning roles, right, so investigator, data analyst, domain expert, just giving even prompted roles to models and then orchestrating them gets better results than any one single frontier model.
So Microsoft CEO envisions that each company will have its own locally ran AI models, that each department or even by each position can train a local model, changing the weights and assigning it specific job duties. Each of these local models trained in a specific job duty actually work better together than sending single prompts to one AI model. In other words, the CEO of Microsoft, the fourth largest US company by market cap, is saying that the models of Anthropic and OpenAI being closed source does not work for agentic workflows. And open source, locally trained and adapted models are much better. So the future is likely not to be dominated by one or two closed source models, More than likely, we're going to have hundreds or even thousands of locally run models that are specifically designed to handle specialized tasks. And this is not just for businesses, it's going to be even for consumers. Some of these models, such as DeepSeek, can actually locally run on your laptop, giving you full control of your data and the model weights. Palantir CEO Alex Karp also had a similar opinion, noting that token maxing or the token cost of OpenAI and Anthropic were way too high, and that companies actually preferred an open source model that allowed enterprises and governments to control and manage their own data. So, if you're OpenAI or Anthropic, what options do you have left? You can't stop foreign-based AI companies in China from releasing open source models that are 90% cheaper and have similar performance. So your only option left is to get involved with the US government. How to get involved? Just give the US government an ownership stake in your company. This is what OpenAI is already proposing, speaking directly with the Trump administration about giving them a 5% stake in the company. Now, when this happens, basically the US taxpayer owns the company. And the government is supposed to act in the best interest of taxpayers, right? Which means the government will do what needs to be done to keep the value of OpenAI high. And we already saw this with Intel. Back in August 2025, the US government took a 10% stake in Intel. What's the value today? You can see from August 22nd, 2025, when this news verse was publicized, Intel stock has now increased from $25 to $120 in less than a year, giving investors a 380% return. That's a very good return for less than a year. That means it's a smart move for OpenAI to offer the US government 5% of its company, and Anthropic is likely to do the same. And it's the best option for them for a second reason, because the US government already controls them. In just the past month, the US government has shown its control over US AI companies. Earlier in June, it made Anthropic remove the release of one of its newer models called Fable 5 and Mythos 5, citing national security concerns. Later that same month in June, the US government also told OpenAI to restrict the release of its GPT 5.6 model. Imagine if this had happened and OpenAI or Anthropic were public companies. What would have been the reaction to the stock price? Probably not good at all. However, the US government owning 5% of AI companies would obviously change its decision calculus concerning stopping them from releasing a product. Because stopping them from releasing this product could actually result in the stock price going down, meaning taxpayers' stake inside the company or their stock owned of the company would also go down. And whether it's the Trump administration or any other future administration, they will definitely think twice before doing things that could directly harm US taxpayers. But another benefit of OpenAI giving 5% to the government is that it encourages the US government to protect OpenAI because they own a percentage of it. And when I say protect, I mean from competition. A similar example is the US government protecting US automakers. Some foreign electric vehicle automakers, such as BYD, are actually blocked or heavily taxed through tariffs from coming into the US market. While some claim it's for national security concerns, it's well known that companies like Ford and General Motors would have a much, much tougher competitive environment if they had to compete with the likes of BYD. The same scenario could play out with AI. The US government is not going to let OpenAI fail to competitors, especially foreign competitors, if they own a $40 billion stake in the company. Similar to the high tariffs or outright bans the US has done against foreign electric vehicle makers, we can see them doing the same thing against foreign AI companies. They can literally pass a nationwide ban restricting US consumers and businesses from using foreign-based AI. The outcome could be US AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic surviving through government contracts and protectionism, just as US automakers do, but not being able to compete internationally because they have subpar products. Remember, focus on the fundamentals. General Motors and Ford are doing okay domestically, but internationally, they face declining sales and declining market share, showing that they really cannot compete outside the US market where they are protected. Will this be the same outcome for US businesses and consumers? Forced to use subpar, expensive AI models that are only used in the US because they can't compete internationally? Unfortunately, this could be the outcome if OpenAI and Anthropic don't drastically change its business models to compete with open source models like DeepSeek and GLM. Just look at historical track record of outcomes when technology or things are closed source versus open source. Money and financial transactions are closed source. They're controlled by central banks and the government, similarly to closed source AI models being controlled by OpenAI and Anthropic. But today we have Bitcoin, which is decentralized, permissionless money that's now worth $1.25 trillion and is open source. Governments could not stop open source blockchain technology and now have to accept it. So why do businesses and governments now think that closed source AI models will work over the long term? And that's what's the angle on US AI companies' last option to survive. But these are my thoughts. What are yours? If you enjoyed this video, believe it has some valuable insights, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and I'll see you next time.